Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Harry Houdini. Harry Houdini was an Austro-Hungarian-born American stage magician and stunt performer noted for his sensational escape acts. He first attracted notice in vaudeville in the US and then as Harry Handcuff Houdini on a tour of Europe where he challenged police forces to keep him locked up. Soon he extended his repertoire to include chains, ropes slung from skyscrapers, straitjackets underwater, and having to escape from and hold his breath inside a sealed milk can with water in it. In 1904, thousands watched as he tried to escape from special handcuffs commissioned by London's Daily Mirror, keeping them in suspense for an hour. Another stunt saw him buried alive and only just able to claw himself to the surface, emerging in a state of near breakdown. While many suspected that these escapes were faked, Houdini presented himself as the scourge of fake spiritualists. As president of the Society of American Magicians, he was keen to uphold professional standards and expose fraudulent artists. He was also quick to sue anyone who imitated his escape stunts. Houdini made several movies but quit acting when it failed to bring in money. He was also a keen aviator and aimed to become the first man to fly a plane in Australia. Early life. Erich Weitz was born in Budapest to a Jewish family. His parents were Rabbi Meir Samuel Weitz and Cecilia Steiner. Houdini was one of 7 children. Herman M., who was Houdini's half-brother by Rabbi Weitz's first marriage, Nathan J., Gottfried William, Theodore, Leopold D., and Carrie Gladys, who was left almost blind after a childhood accident. Weitz arrived in the United States on July 3, 1878 on the SS Frisia with his mother and his 4 brothers. The family changed their name to the German spelling Weiss, and Erich became Eric. The family lived in Appleton, Wisconsin, where his father served as rabbi of the Zion Reform Jewish congregation. According to the 1880 census, the family lived on Appleton Street. On June 6, 1882, Rabbi Weiss became an American citizen. Losing his tenure at Zion in 1887, Rabbi Weiss moved with Eric to New York City, where they lived in a boarding house on East 79th Street. He was joined by the rest of the family once Rabbi Weiss found permanent housing. As a child, Erich Weiss took several jobs, making his public debut as a 9-year-old trapeze artist, calling himself Eric the Prince of the Air. He was also a champion cross-country runner in his youth. When Weiss became a professional magician, he began calling himself Harry Houdini, after the French magician Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin. After reading Robert Houdin's autobiography in 1890, Weiss incorrectly believed that an I at the end of a name meant like in French. In later life, Houdini claimed that the first part of his new name, Harry, was an homage to Harry Keller, whom he also admired. When he was a teenager, Houdini was coached by the magician Joseph Rinn at the Pastime Athletic Club. Houdini became an active Freemason and was a member of St. Cecilia Lodge 68 in New York City. In 1918, he registered for selective service as Harry Handcuff Houdini. Magic career. Houdini began his magic career in 1891 but had little success. He appeared in a tent act with strongman Emile Jarreau. He performed in dime museums and sideshows and even doubled as the wild man at a circus. Houdini focused initially on traditional card tricks. At one point, he billed himself as the king of cards. Other professional magicians would come to regard Houdini as a competent but not particularly skilled sleight-of-hand artist, lacking the grace and finesse required to achieve excellence in that craft. He soon began experimenting with escape acts. In 1893, while performing with his brother At Coney Island as the brothers Houdini, Houdini met a fellow performer Wilhelmina Beatrice Bess Rana. Bess was initially courted by Dash, but she and Houdini married in 1894, with Bess replacing Dash in the act which became known as the Houdinis. For the rest of Houdini's performing career, Bess worked as his stage assistant. Houdini's big break came in 1899 when he met manager Martin Beck in St. Paul, Minnesota. Impressed by Houdini's handcuffs act, Beck advised him to concentrate on escape acts, and booked him on the Orpheum vaudeville circuit. Within months he was performing at the top vaudeville houses in the country. In 1900, Beck arranged for Houdini to tour Europe. After some days of unsuccessful interviews in London, Houdini's British agent Harry Day helped him to get an interview with C. Dundas Slater, then manager of the Alhambra Theatre. He was introduced to William Melville and gave a demonstration of escape from handcuffs at Scotland Yard. He succeeded in baffling the police so effectively that he was booked at the Alhambra for 6 months. His show was an immediate hit and his salary rose to $300 a week. Houdini became widely known as the Handcuff King. He toured England, Scotland, the Netherlands, Germany, France and Russia. In each city, Houdini challenged local police to restrain him with shackles and lock him in their jails. In many of these challenge escapes, he was first stripped nude and searched. In Moscow, he escaped from a Siberian prison transport van, claiming that had he been unable to free himself, he would have had to travel to Siberia, where the only key was kept. In Cologne, he sued a police officer, Werner Graf, who alleged that he made his escapes via bribery. Houdini won the case. When he opened the judge's safe with his newfound wealth, Houdini purchased a dress said to have been made for Queen Victoria. He then arranged a grand reception, where he presented his mother in the dress to all their relatives. Houdini said it was the happiest day of his life. In 1904, Houdini returned to the U.S. and purchased a house for $25,000, a brownstone at 278 West 113th Street in Harlem, New York City. Whilst on tour in Europe in 1902, Houdini visited Blois with the aim of meeting the widow of Émile Houdin, the son of Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin, for an interview and permission to visit his grave. He did not receive permission, but still visited the grave. Houdini believed that he had been treated unfairly, and later wrote a negative account of the incident in his magazine, claiming he was treated most discourteously by Madame W. Émile Robert Houdin. In 1906, he sent a letter to the French magazine L'Illusioniste stating, "You will certainly enjoy the article on Robert Houdin I am about to publish in my magazine. Yes, my dear friend, I think I can finally demolish your idol, who has so long been placed on a pedestal that he did not deserve." In 1906, Houdini created his own publication, The Conjurer's Monthly Magazine. It was a competitor to the Sphinx but was short-lived, and only 2 volumes were released until August 1908. Magic historian Jim Steinmeier has noted that Houdini couldn't resist using the journal for his own crusades, attacking his rivals, praising his own appearances, and subtly rewriting history to favor his view of magic. From 1907 and throughout the 1910s, Houdini performed with great success in the United States. He freed himself from jail's handcuffs, chains, ropes, and straitjackets, often while hanging from a rope in sight of street audiences. Because of imitators, Houdini put his handcuff act behind him on January 25, 1908, and began escaping from a locked water-filled milk can. The possibility of failure and death thrilled his audiences. Houdini also expanded his repertoire with his escape challenge act, in which he invited the public to devise contraptions to hold him These included nailed packing crates, riveted boilers, wet sheets, mail bags, and even the belly of a whale that had washed ashore in Boston. Brewers in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and other cities challenged Houdini to escape from a barrel after they filled it with beer. Many of these challenges were arranged with local merchants in one of the first uses of mass tie-in marketing, rather than promote the idea that he was assisted by spirits, as did the Davenport brothers and others. Houdini's advertisements showed him making his escapes via dematerializing. Although Houdini himself never claimed to have supernatural powers, after much research, Houdini wrote a collection of articles on the history of magic, which were expanded into The Unmasking of Robert Houdin, published in 1908. In this book he attacked his former idol Robert Houdin as liar and a fraud, for having claimed the invention of automata and effects such as aerial suspension, which had been in existence for many years. Many of the allegations in the book were dismissed by magicians and researchers who defended Robert Houdin. Magician Jean Hugard would later write a full rebuttal to Houdini's book. In 1913, Houdini introduced the Chinese water torture cell, in which he was suspended upside down in a locked glass and steel cabinet full to overflowing, with water holding his breath for more than 3 minutes. He would go on performing this escape for the rest of his life. During his career, Houdini explained some of his tricks in books written for the Magic Brotherhood. In Handcuff Secrets, he revealed how many locks and handcuffs could be opened with properly applied force, others with shoestrings. Other times, he carried concealed lockpicks or keys when tied down in ropes as straitjackets. He gained wiggle room by enlarging his shoulders and chest, moving his arms slightly away from his body. His straitjacket escape was originally performed behind curtains, with him popping out free at the end. Houdini's brother discovered that audiences were more impressed when the curtains were eliminated so they could watch him struggle to get out. On more than one occasion they both performed straitjacket escapes while dangling upside down from the roof of a building in the same city. For most of his career, Houdini was a headline act in vaudeville. For many years, he was the highest-paid performer in American vaudeville. One of Houdini's most notable non-escape stage illusions was performed at the New York Hippodrome, when he vanished a full-grown elephant from the stage. He had purchased this trick from the magician Charles Morritt. In 1923, Houdini became president of Martinka, America's oldest magic company. The business is still in operation today. He also served as president of the Society of American Magicians from 1917 until his death in 1926. Founded on May 10, 1902, in the back room of Martinka's magic shop in New York, the society expanded under the leadership of Harry Houdini during his term as national president. From 1917 to 1926, Houdini was magic's greatest visionary. He sought to create a large, unified national network of professional and amateur magicians. Wherever he traveled, he gave a lengthy formal address to the local magic club, made speeches, and usually threw a banquet for the members at his own expense. He said, "The magicians' clubs as a rule are small, they are weak. But if we were amalgamated into one big body, the society would be stronger, and it would mean making the small clubs powerful and worthwhile. Members would find a welcome wherever they happened to be, and conversely, the safeguard of a city-to-city hotline to track explosives and other undesirables." For most of 1916, while on his vaudeville tour, Houdini had been recruiting, at his own expense, local magic clubs to join the SAM in an effort to revitalize what he felt was a weak organization. Houdini persuaded groups in Buffalo, Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Kansas City to join. As had happened in London, he persuaded magicians to join The Buffalo Club joined as the first branch of the society. Chicago Assembly No. 3 was, as the name implies, the third regional club to be established by the SAM, whose assemblies now number in the hundreds. In 1917, he signed Assembly No. 3's charter into existence, and that charter and this club continue to provide Chicago magicians with a connection to each other and to their past. Houdini dined with, addressed and got pledges from similar clubs in Detroit, Rochester, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Cincinnati and elsewhere. This was the biggest movement ever in the history of magic. In places where no clubs existed, he rounded up individual magicians, introduced them to each other, and urged them into the fold. By the end of 1916, magicians' clubs in San Francisco and other cities that Houdini had not visited were offering to become assemblies. He had created the richest and longest surviving organization of magicians in the world. It now embraces almost 6,000 dues-paying members and almost 300 assemblies worldwide. In July 1926, Houdini was elected for the ninth successive time president of the Society of American Magicians. Every other president has only served for 1 year. He also was president of the Magicians' Club of London. In the final years of his life, Houdini launched his own full evening show, which he billed as 3 shows in one: Magic Escapes and Fraud Mediums Exposed. Mirror Challenge. In 1904, the London Daily Mirror newspaper challenged Houdini to escape from special handcuffs that it claimed had taken Nathaniel Hart, a locksmith from Birmingham, 5 years to make. Houdini accepted the challenge for March 17 during a matinee performance at London's Hippodrome Theatre. It was reported that 4,000 people and more than 100 journalists turned out for the much-hyped event. The escape attempt dragged on for over an hour, during which Houdini emerged from his ghost house several times. On one occasion, he asked if the cuffs could be removed so he could take off his coat. The Mirror representative Frank Parker refused, saying Houdini could gain an advantage if he saw how the cuffs were unlocked. Houdini promptly took out a penknife and, holding the knife in his teeth, used it to cut his coat from his body. Some 56 minutes later, Houdini's wife appeared on stage and gave him a kiss. Many thought that in her mouth was the key to unlock the special handcuffs. However, it has since been suggested that Bess did not in fact enter the stage at all, and that this theory is unlikely due to the size of the 6-inch key. Houdini then went back behind the curtain. After an hour and 10 minutes, Houdini emerged free. As he was paraded on the shoulders of the cheering crowd, he broke down and wept. Houdini later said it was the most difficult escape of his career. After Houdini's death, his friend Martin Beck was quoted in Will Goldstein's book, Sensational Tales of Mystery Men, as admitting that Houdini was bested that day and had appealed to his wife Bess for help. Goldstein goes on to claim that Bess begged the key from the Mirror representative, then slipped it to Houdini in a glass of water. It was stated in the book The Secret Life of Houdini that the key required to open the specially designed mirror handcuffs was 6 inches long and could not have been smuggled to Houdini in a glass of water. Goldstein offered no proof of his account, and many modern biographers have found evidence that the mirror challenge may have been arranged by Houdini and that his long struggle to escape was pure showmanship. This escape was discussed in depth on the Travel Channel's Mysteries at the Museum in an interview with Houdini expert magician and escape artist Dorothy Dietrich of Scranton's Houdini Museum. A full-size design of the same mirror handcuffs, as well as a replica of the Brahma-style key, for it is on display to the public at the Houdini Museum in Scranton, Pennsylvania. This set of cuffs is believed to be one of only 6 in the world, some of which are not on display. Milk and escape. In 1908, Houdini introduced his own original act, the milk and escape. In this act, Houdini was handcuffed and sealed inside an oversized milk can filled with water, and made his escape behind a curtain. As part of the effect, Houdini invited members of the audience to hold their breath along with him while he was inside the can, advertised with dramatic posters that proclaimed, "Failure means a drowning death." The escape proved to be a sensation. Houdini soon modified the escape to include the milk can being locked inside a wooden chest, being chained or padlocked. Houdini performed the milk and escape as a regular part of his act for only 4 years, but it has remained one of the acts most associated with him. Houdini's brother, Theodore Hardin, continued to perform the milk and escape, and its wooden chest variant into the 1940s. The American Museum of Magic has the milk can, an overboard box used by Houdini. Chinese water torture cell. Around 1912, the vast number of imitators prompted Houdini to replace his milk can act with the Chinese water torture cell. In this escape, Houdini's feet were locked in stocks, and he was lowered upside down into a tank filled with water. The mahogany and metal cell featured a glass front through which audiences could clearly see Houdini. The stocks were locked to the top of the cell and a curtain concealed his escape. In the earliest version of the torture cell, a metal cage was lowered into the cell, and Houdini was enclosed inside that. While making the escape more difficult, the cage prevented Houdini from turning. The cage bars also offered protection should the front glass break. The original cell was built in England, where Houdini first performed the escape for an audience of one person as part of a one-act play he called Houdini Upside Down. This was so he could copyright the effect and have grounds to sue imitators, which he did. While the escape was advertised as the Chinese water torture cell or the water torture cell, Houdini always referred to it as the Upside Down or USD. The first public performance of the USD was at the Circus Busch in Berlin on September 21, 1912. Houdini continued to perform the escape until his death in 1926. Suspended straitjacket escape. One of Houdini's most popular publicity stunts was to have himself strapped into a regulation straitjacket and suspended by his ankles from a tall building, a crane. Houdini would then make his escape in full view of the assembled crowd. In many cases, Houdini drew tens of thousands of onlookers who brought city traffic to a halt. Houdini would sometimes ensure press coverage by performing the escape from the office building of a local newspaper. In New York City, Houdini performed the suspended straitjacket escape from a crane being used to build the New York subway. After flinging his body in the air, he escaped from the straitjacket. Starting from when he was hoisted up in the air by the crane to when the straitjacket was completely off, it took him 2 minutes and 37 seconds. There is film footage in the Library of Congress of Houdini performing the escape. Films of his escapes are also shown at the Houdini Museum in Scranton, Pennsylvania. After being battered against a building in high winds during one escape, Houdini performed the escape with a visible safety wire on his ankle so that he could be pulled away from the building if necessary. The idea for the upside-down escape was given to Houdini by a young boy named Randolph Osborne Douglas when the two met at a performance at Sheffield's Empire Theatre. Overboard box escape. Another of Houdini's most famous publicity stunts was to escape from a nailed and roped packing crate after it had been lowered into water. He first performed the escape in New York's East River on July 7, 1912. Police forbade him from using one of the piers, so he hired a tugboat and invited press on board. Houdini was locked in handcuffs and leg irons, then nailed into the crate, which was roped and weighed down with 200 pounds of lead. The crate was then lowered into the water. He escaped in 57 seconds. The crate was pulled to the surface and found still to be intact, with the manacles inside. Houdini performed this escape many times, and even performed a version on stage, first at Hammerstein's Roof Garden, where a 5,500 US gal tank was specially built, and later at the New York Hippodrome. Buried alive stunt. Houdini performed at least 3 variations on a buried alive stunt during his career. The first was near Santa Ana, California in 1915, and it almost cost Houdini his life. Houdini was buried without a casket in a pit of earth 6 feet deep. He became exhausted and panicked while trying to dig his way to the surface, and called for help. When his hand finally broke the surface, he fell unconscious and had to be pulled from the grave by his assistants. Houdini wrote in his diary that the escape was very dangerous and that the weight of the earth is killing. Houdini's second variation on Buried Alive was an endurance test designed to expose mystical Egyptian performer Rahman Bey, who had claimed to use supernatural powers to remain in a sealed casket for an hour. Houdini betted Bey on August 5, 1926, by remaining in a sealed casket, a coffin, submerged in the swimming pool of New York's Hotel Shelton for 1.5 hours. Houdini claimed he did not use any trickery or supernatural powers to accomplish this feat, just controlled breathing. He repeated the feat at the YMCA in Worcester, Massachusetts on September 28, 1926, this time remaining sealed for 1 hour and 11 minutes. Houdini's final Buried Alive was an elaborate stage escape that featured in his full evening show. Houdini would escape after being strapped in a straitjacket, sealed in a casket, and then buried in a large tank filled with sand. While posters advertising the escape exist, it is unclear whether Houdini ever performed Buried Alive on stage. The stunt was to be the feature escape of his 1927 season, but Houdini died on October 31, 1926. The bronze casket Houdini created for Buried Alive was used to transport Houdini's body from Detroit to New York following his death on Halloween. Movie career. In 1906, Houdini started showing films of his outside escapes as part of his vaudeville act. In Boston, he presented a short film called Houdini Defeats Hackenschmidt. Georg Hackenschmidt was a famous wrestler of the day, but the nature of their contest is unknown as the film is lost. In 1909, Houdini made a film in Paris for Cinema Luxe titled Merveilleux Exploits du Célèbre Houdini à Paris. It featured a loose narrative designed to showcase several of Houdini's famous escapes, including his straitjacket and underwater handcuff escapes. That same year, Houdini got an offer to star as Captain Nemo in a silent version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but the project never made it into production. It is often erroneously reported that Houdini served as special effects consultant on the Wharton International cliffhanger serial The Mysteries of Myra, shot in Ithaca, New York, because Harry Grossman, director of The Master Mystery, also filmed a serial in Ithaca at about the same time. The consultants on the serial were pioneering Hereward Carrington and Aleister Crowley. In 1918, Houdini signed a contract with film producer B.A. Rolfe to star in a 15-part serial, The Master Mystery. As was common at the time, the film serial was released simultaneously with a novel. Financial difficulties resulted in B.A. Rolfe Productions going out of business, but The Master Mystery led to Houdini being signed by famous players Lasky Corporation, Paramount Pictures, for whom he made 2 pictures, The Grim Game and Terror Island. The Grim Game was Houdini's first full-length movie, and is reputed to be his best, because of the flammable nature of nitrate film, and the inherent chemical instability of the acetate safety film that supplanted it. Only 10% of old silent movies exist. Film historians considered the film lost. One copy did exist hidden in the collection of a private collector only known to a tiny group of magicians that saw it. Dick Brooks and Dorothy Dietrich of the Houdini Museum in Scranton, Pennsylvania had seen it twice on the invitation of the collector. After many years of trying, they finally got to him to agree to sell the film to Turner Classic Movies, who restored the complete 71-minute film. The film, not seen by the general public for 96 years, was shown by TCM on March 29, 2015, as a highlight of their yearly 4-day festival in Hollywood. While filming an aerial stunt for the Grim Game, 2 biplanes collided in mid-air, with a stuntman doubling Houdini dangling by a rope from one of the planes. Publicity was geared heavily toward promoting this dramatic, caught-on-film moment, claiming it was Houdini himself dangling from the plane. While filming these movies in Los Angeles, Houdini rented a home in Laurel Canyon. Following his 2-picture stint in Hollywood, Houdini returned to New York and started his own film production company called the Houdini Picture Corporation. He produced and starred in 2 films, The Man from Beyond and Haldane of the Secret Service. He also founded his own film laboratory business called the Film Development Corporation, gambling on a new process for developing motion picture film. Houdini's brother Theodore Hardeen left his own career as a magician and escape artist to run the company. Magician Harry Keller was a major investor. Neither Houdini's acting career nor FDC found success, and he gave up on the movie business in 1923, complaining that the profits are too meager. In April 2008, Kino International released a DVD box set of Houdini's surviving silent films, including The Master Mystery, Terror Island, The Man from Beyond, Haldane of the Secret Service, and 5 Minutes from the Grim Game. The set also includes newsreel footage of Houdini's escapes from 1907 to 1923 in a section from Merveilleux Exploits du Célèbre Houdini à Paris, although it is not identified as such. Aviator. In 1909, Houdini became fascinated with aviation. He purchased a French voice and biplane for $5,000, and hired a full-time mechanic, Antonio Brasic. After crashing once, he made his first successful flight on November 26 in Hamburg, Germany. The following year, Houdini toured Australia. He brought along his voice and biplane with the intention to be the first person in Australia to fly. Falsely reported as pioneer. On March 18, 1910, he made 3 flights at Diggers Rest, Victoria, near Melbourne. It was reported at the time that this was the first aerial flight in Australia, and a century later, some major news outlets still credit him with this feat. Wing Commander Harry Cobby wrote in Aircraft in March 1938 that the first aeroplane flight in the Southern Hemisphere was made on December 9, 1909, by Mr. Colin de Vries, a Londoner, at Victoria Park Racecourse, Sydney, in a Wilbur Wright aeroplane. Colin de Vries was a trained pilot, having learnt to fly in Cannes, France. By modern standards, his flight time was minimal, but in 1909 he had accumulated enough to become an instructor. On his first flight he took off, maintained straight and level flight, albeit briefly, and landed safely. His crash landing on his second flight, when he tried to retrieve his hat which was blown off, demonstrated what a momentary lack of attention could cause while flying a Wright Model A. It is accepted by Australian historians and the Aviation Historical Society of Australia that the definition of flight established by the Gorrell Committee on behalf of the Aero Club of Great Britain dictates the acceptance of a flight or its rejection, giving Colin de Vries credit as the first to make an aeroplane flight in Australia and the Southern Hemisphere. Additionally, aviation pioneer Richard Pearce is believed by many New Zealand historians to have undertaken his first flight as early as 1902, which would give him not only the Southern Hemisphere but the world record. Although this is disputed, in 1965, aviation journalist Stanley Brogden formed the view that the first powered flight in Australia took place at Bolivar in South Australia. The aircraft was a Blériot monoplane, with Fred Custance as the pilot. The flight took place on March 17, 1910. The next day, when Houdini took to the air, the Herald newspaper reported Custance's flight, stating it had lasted 5 minutes 25 seconds at a height of between 12 and 15 feet. In 2010, Australia Post issued stamps commemorating Colin de Vries, Houdini and John Robertson Dugan, crediting only de Vries and Dugan with historical firsts. Dugan was an Australian pioneer aviator who built and flew the first Australian-made aircraft. Australia Post did acknowledge the part Houdini played but did not attribute any record to him. After completing his Australia tour, Houdini put the voice into storage in England. He announced he would use it to fly from city to city during his next music hall tour, and even promised to leap from it handcuffed, but he never flew again. Appearance and voice recordings. Unlike the image of a classic magician, Houdini was short and stocky, and typically appeared on stage in a long frock coat and tie. Most biographers give his height as, but descriptions vary. Houdini was also said to be slightly bow-legged, which aided in his ability to gain a slack during his rope escapes. In the 1997 biography Houdini, The Career of Eric Weiss, author Kenneth Silverman summarizes how reporters described Houdini's appearance. During his early career, Houdini made the only known recordings of his voice on Edison wax cylinders on October 29, 1914 in Flatbush, New York. On them, Houdini practices several different introductory speeches for his famous Chinese water torture cell. He also invites his sister Gladys to recite a poem. Houdini then recites the same poem in German. The 6 wax cylinders were discovered in the collection of magician John Mulholland after his death in 1970. They are part of the David Copperfield collection. Death. Harry Houdini died of peritonitis secondary to a ruptured appendix at 1:26 p.m. on October 31, 1926 in room 401 at Detroit's Grace Hospital, aged 52. In his final days he optimistically held to a strong belief that he would recover, but his last words before dying were reportedly, "I'm tired of fighting." Eyewitnesses to an incident at Houdini's dressing room in the Princess Theatre in Montreal gave rise to speculation that Houdini's death was caused by a McGill University student, Jocelyn Gordon Whitehead, who delivered a surprise attack of multiple blows to Houdini's abdomen. The eyewitnesses, students named Jacques Price and Sam Smilowitz, proffered accounts of the incident that generally corroborated one another. Price describes Whitehead asking Houdini if he believed in the miracles of the Bible and whether it was true that punches in the stomach did not hurt him. He then delivered some very hammer-like blows below the belt. Houdini was reclining on a couch at the time, having broken his ankle while performing several days earlier. Price states that Houdini winced at each blow and stopped Whitehead suddenly in the midst of a punch, gesturing that he had enough, and adding that he had no opportunity to prepare himself against the blows, as he did not expect Whitehead to strike him so suddenly and forcefully. Had his ankle not been broken, he would have risen from the couch into a better position to brace himself. Throughout the evening, Houdini performed in great pain. He was unable to sleep, and remained in constant pain for the next 2 days, but did not seek medical help. When he finally saw a doctor, he was found to have a fever of 102 degrees Fahrenheit and acute appendicitis, and was advised to have immediate surgery. He ignored the advice and decided to go on with the show. When Houdini arrived at the Garrick Theatre in Detroit, Michigan on October 24, 1926, for what would be his last performance, he had a fever of 104 F. Despite the diagnosis, Houdini took the stage. He was reported to have passed out during the show but was revived and continued. Afterwards, he was hospitalized at Detroit's Grace Hospital. It is not entirely clear what relationship the encounter in the dressing room had on Houdini's eventual death. As Snopes points out, the relationship between blunt trauma and appendicitis is not clear. One theory suggests that Houdini was unaware that he was suffering from appendicitis, which would have been clearer to him had he not received blows to the abdomen. After taking statements from Price and Smilovitz, Houdini's insurance company concluded that the death was due to the dressing room incident, and paid double indemnity. Houdini gravesite. Houdini's funeral was held on November 4, 1926 in New York City with more than 2,000 mourners in attendance. He was interred in the Machpelah Cemetery in Glendale, Queens, with the crest of the Society of American Magicians inscribed on his gravesite. A statuary bust was added to the exedra in 1927, a rarity, because graven images are forbidden in Jewish cemeteries. In 1975, the bust was destroyed by vandals. Temporary busts were placed at the grave until 2011, when a group who came to be called the Houdini Commandos from the Houdini Museum in Scranton, Pennsylvania, placed a permanent bust with the permission of Houdini's family and of the cemetery. The Society of American Magicians took responsibility for the upkeep of the site. As Houdini had willed a large sum of money to the organization, he had grown from one club to 5,000, 6,000 dues-paying membership worldwide. The payment of upkeep was abandoned by the Society's Dean George Schindler, who said Houdini paid for perpetual care, but there's nobody at the cemetery to provide it, adding that the operator of the cemetery, David Jacobson, sends us a bill for upkeep every year, but we never pay it because he never provides any care. Members of the society tidy the grave themselves. Machpelah Cemetery operator Jacobson said they never paid the cemetery for any restoration of the Houdini family plot in my tenure since 1988. Claiming that the money came from the cemetery's dwindling funds. The granite monuments of Houdini's sister Gladys and brother Leopold were also destroyed by vandals. For many years until recently, the Houdini grave site has been only cared for by Dorothy Dietrich and Dick Brooks of the Houdini Museum in Scranton, Pennsylvania. The Society of American Magicians, at its National Council meeting in Boca Raton, Florida in 2013, under the prompting of the Houdini Museum's Dorothy Dietrich and Dick Brooks, voted to assume the financial responsibilities for the care and maintenance of the Houdini gravesite. In Mum magazine, the Society's official magazine, President Al Sanders announced, "Harry Houdini is an icon as revered as Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe. He is not only a magical icon, his gravesite bears the seal of the Society of American Magicians. That seal is our brand and we should be proud to protect it. This gravesite is clearly our responsibility, and I'm proud to report that the National Council unanimously voted to maintain Houdini's final resting place. The Houdini Gravesite Restoration Committee, under the chairmanship of National President David Bowers is working closely with National President Kenrick Ice MacDonald to see this project to completion. Bowers said it is a foregone conclusion that the society will approve the funding request because Houdini is responsible for the Society of American Magicians being what it is today. We owe a debt of gratitude to him. Like Bowers, MacDonald said the motivation behind the repairs is to properly honor the grave of the Babe Ruth of magicians. This is hallowed ground, he said. When you ask people about magicians, the first thing they say is Harry Houdini. While the actual plot will remain under the control of Machpelah Cemetery management, the Society of American Magicians, with the help of the Houdini Museum in Pennsylvania, will be in charge of the restoration. Magicians Dorothy Dietrich and Dick Brooks have been caring for the escape artist Queen's grave over the years. This is a monument where people go and visit on a daily basis, said Dietrich, who is spearheading restoration efforts. The nearly 80-year-old popular plot at the Machpelah Cemetery has fallen into disrepair over the years. The Houdini Museum has teamed with the Society of American Magicians, one of the oldest fraternal magic organizations in the world, to give the beloved site a facelift. The organization has a specific Houdini gravesite committee made up of 9 members headed up by President-elect David Bowers, who brought this project to the Society's attention. Kenrick Ice MacDonald, the current president of the Society of American Magicians, said, "You have to know the history. Houdini served as president from 1917 until his death in 1926. Houdini's burial site needs an infusion of cash to restore it to its former glory." Magician Dietrich said the repairs could cost tens of thousands of dollars after consulting with glass experts and grave artisans. "It's a wonderful project, but it's taken a lifetime to get people interested," she said. "It's long overdue and it's great that it's happening." Houdini was a living superhero, Dietrich said. "He wasn't just a magician and escape artist. He was a great humanitarian." To this day, the society holds a Broken One ceremony at the grave every November. Houdini's widow Bess died of a heart attack on February 11, 1943. Aged 67 in Needles, California, while on a train en route from Los Angeles to New York City. She had expressed a wish to be buried next to her husband, but instead was interred 35 miles due north at the Gate of Heaven Cemetery in Westchester County, New York, as her Catholic family refused to allow her to be buried in a Jewish cemetery. Proposed exhumation. On March 22, 2007, Houdini's grandnephew George Hardin announced that the courts would be asked to allow exhumation of Houdini's body to investigate the possibility of Houdini being murdered by spiritualists, as suggested in the biography The Secret Life of Houdini. In a statement given to the Houdini Museum in Scranton, the family of Bess Houdini opposed the application and suggested it was a publicity ploy for the book. The Washington Post stated that the press conference was not arranged by the family of Houdini. Instead, the Post reported it was orchestrated by authors Kalash and Sloman, who hired the PR firm Dan Claus Communications to promote their book. In 2008, it was revealed the parties involved never filed legal papers to perform an exhumation. Legacy. Houdini's brother Theodore Hardin, who returned to performing after Houdini's death, inherited his brother's effects and props. Houdini's will stipulated that all the effects should be burned and destroyed upon Hardin's death. Hardin sold much of the collection to magician and Houdini enthusiast Sidney Hollis Radner during the 1940s, including the water torture cell. Radner allowed choice pieces of the collection to be displayed at the Houdini Magical Hall of Fame in Niagara Falls, Ontario. In 1995, a fire destroyed the museum. The water torture cell's metal frame remained and it was restored by illusion builder John Borken. Many of the props contained in the museum, such as the mirror handcuffs, Houdini's original packing crate, a milk can and a straitjacket, survived the fire and were auctioned in 1999 and 2008. Radner loaned the bulk of his collection for archiving to the Outagamie Museum in Appleton, Wisconsin, but reclaimed it in 2003 and auctioned it in Las Vegas on October 30, 2004. Houdini was a formidable collector, and bequeathed many of his holdings and paper archives on magic and spiritualism to the Library of Congress, which became the basis for the Houdini collection in cyberspace. In 1934, the bulk of Houdini's collection of American and British theatrical material, along with a significant portion of his business and personal papers, and some of his collections of other magicians, were sold to pay off estate debts to theatre magnate Messmore Kendall. In 1958, Kendall donated his collection to the Hoblit Theatre Library at the University of Texas at Austin. In the 1960s, the Hoblit Library became part of the Harry Ransom Center. The extensive Houdini collection includes a 1584 first edition of Reginald Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft and David Garrick's travel diary to Paris from 1751. Some of the scrapbooks in the Houdini collection have been digitized. The collection was exclusively paper-based until April 2016, when the Ransom Center acquired one of Houdini's ball weights with chain and ankle cuff. In October 2016, in conjunction with the 90th anniversary of the death of Houdini, the Ransom Center embarked on a major recataloguing of the Houdini collection to make it more visible and accessible to researchers. The collection is expected to reopen within a year with a fully indexed digital finding aid. A large portion of Houdini's estate holdings and memorabilia was willed to his fellow magician and friend John Mulholland. In 1991, illusionist and television performer David Copperfield purchased all of Mulholland's Houdini holdings from Mulholland's estate. These are now archived and preserved in Copperfield's warehouse at his headquarters in Las Vegas. It contains the world's largest collection of Houdini memorabilia, and preserves approximately 80,000 items of memorabilia of Houdini and other magicians, including Houdini's stage props and material, his rebuilt water torture cabinet, and his metamorphosis trunk. It is not open to the public, but tours are available by invitation to magicians, scholars, researchers, journalists, and serious collectors. In a posthumous ceremony on October 31, 1975, Houdini was given a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 7001 Hollywood Boulevard. The Houdini Museum in Scranton, Pennsylvania bills itself as the only building in the world entirely dedicated to Houdini. It is open to the public year-round, by reservation. It includes Houdini films, a guided tour about Houdini's life, and a stage magic show. Magicians Dorothy Dietrich and Dick Brooks opened the facility in 1991. The Magic Castle in Los Angeles, California, a nightclub for magicians and magic enthusiasts, as well as the clubhouse for the Academy of Magical Arts, features Houdini seances performed by magician Misty Lee. The House of Houdini is a museum and performance venue located at 11 Dish Square in the Buda Castle in Budapest, Hungary. It claims to house the largest collection of original Houdini artifacts in Europe. Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Would you like to know more?